It's not uncommon in art-focused communities for people to be told, work on your fundamentals. It's like a mantra, and while it is not incorrect advice, it leaves students asking the obvious question, what on earth are the fundamentals? Well, it depends on who you ask. Some people have a long list and will rattle off things like line, form, light, color, perspective, gesture, anatomy, and even style. All of these things are certainly important, but are they really fundamental to all art? To start, I should clarify. Art is a really lofty term that can include all kinds of things. What Drawabox attempts to explore are the core fundamentals of drawing specifically. And even then, technically it's the core fundamentals of representational drawing, meaning drawing things that exist in the world as opposed to that which is completely abstract. But let's not get caught in the weeds here. So, the core fundamentals of drawing. In order to determine what these are, I like to look at what elements are shared across all facets of drawing. Whether we're looking to draw something hyper-realistic or something hyper-stylized, like cartoons or anime, we are always drawing things that, in their original environment, exist in a three-dimensional world. We may end up drawing them as though they're flat shapes, but understanding how the thing being depicted exists in its original state helps immensely in deciding how to go about flattening them in our own art. That brings us to the primary area Drawabox focuses on, understanding how the things we draw on a flat page exist in a three-dimensional world. Or more succinctly, spatial reasoning. Spatial reasoning is effectively a mixture of two of the fundamentals I'd listed previously, form, with some core concepts relating to perspective mixed in. That's a point worth emphasizing. While Drawabox teaches the basics of perspective early on, it is not a perspective course and only covers the bare minimum in Lesson 1, along with a few more interesting concepts towards the end. So, if you want to learn the highly technical side of perspective, you'd still benefit from taking another course to fill in those gaps later on. Although, in my career as an illustrator and a concept designer thus far, that's not something I needed to explore further just yet. Similarly, if drawing is essentially the act of putting marks down on a page, then another fundamental of drawing would be the ability to put down the specific marks you intend, also known as markmaking, and to do so with confidence and control. Beginners will naturally have trouble controlling the marks they put down on the page, and if we're struggling to get the specific marks we intend to draw, then that makes everything else quite a bit more difficult. Lastly, in order to draw real, physical things, or at least things that are even vaguely rooted in reality, we must learn to see what actually exists. This is known as observation, which is the ability to not just rely on our memory, but to actually pay attention to what's in front of us on a granular level. This is something we explore here to a point, though we don't get too caught up in perfectly replicating reference images, or perfectly matching proportions. We focus on learning to study source material closely enough to pull out specific, useful information for the purposes of constructing objects that feel real and solid. Just like with perspective, this is also something you'll be able to delve into much more deeply, especially when it comes to learning how to replicate things more accurately than we bother with here. At the end of the day, spatial reasoning is our main focus, with confident and controlled markmaking, as well as observation, being skills that are required to work towards that central goal. Spatial reasoning is, by its very nature, something that takes a fair bit of hard work, practice, and time to develop, so it's a skill that the majority of free tutorials you'll come across either glaze over or skip entirely. Despite this, it still serves as an incredibly important component to drawing anything, especially when you want to go beyond directly copying existing images and instead create your own scenes and designs from your imagination. It simply isn't great for growing one's audience when you tell them, well, before you do all this, spend 6 months to a year learning how to think in 3D space. That doesn't mean such resources are bad or not immensely useful, just that they rely on you showing up with certain skills. This also doesn't mean that you shouldn't dive into using them right away. Rather, all it means is that not having everything make sense to you doesn't mean you're not suited to drawing. It's really easy to, say, jump into a figure drawing video on YouTube and to feel lost or to have your drawings come out feeling flat. You probably will learn some things from it, but your inability to apply them as effectively as you'd like can overshadow that with frustration. It's totally okay. You are not alone in this, nor are you broken. You're just in the first grade trying to read a ninth grade book. And you know what? That's great. You should absolutely do it. Just give yourself the patience and understanding that you deserve, and maybe mix in some first grade material in with it. That's what Drawabox is for. To that point, if you are interested in learning figure drawing, I would recommend you check out Art Anatomy for Beginners by Steve Houston on New Masters. For years, I've been looking for a course that takes an analytical approach to figure drawing, which is the way it was taught to me in a class with Kevin Chen, and it wasn't until we started figuring out this partnership with NMA that I found exactly what I was looking for. This approach lines up really well with the focus on form and spatial reasoning we take here, and following along with it in parallel with Drawabox will make for an effective mix. You'll find a link to it in the description below. So, what doesn't Drawabox teach? Well, if it isn't necessary for us to develop those 3D spatial reasoning skills, then we don't bother with it. Light, color, gesture, anatomy, and style. Out. While we do have lessons that explore individual topics, such as plants, insects, animals, vehicles, and so on, none of these lessons are a guide on how to draw that specific thing. Rather, each lesson looks at the same problem. How do we take something complicated, break it down into simple forms based on what we're able to physically see, and how do we build them back up? Each of those different topics we explore brings something new and useful to the table, but it's always about looking at the same core problem from many different angles, the value of which is something we'll explore a little further in another video, when we talk about how to get the most out of this course. If you're familiar with other drawing courses, then you've probably seen them jumping straight into things like shading and talking about light, specifically using them as tools to take a two-dimensional shape and make it feel 3D. This is an approach we do not employ. Instead, we set aside all form shading and rely on other techniques that provide a much stronger understanding of how our forms exist in 3D space and how they relate to one another within it. Don't worry though. As with most things, we found that the understanding of 3D space we work to develop here helps provide a much stronger foundation for the understanding of how light and shading works, and so our students are generally better equipped to learn those concepts. After all, lighting is just the result of understanding the relationships between a light source and a form in the scene. If and when you're interested in learning more about shading, you can check out the 2 lessons on light and shadow in the Fundamentals of Observational Drawing course with Ilya Mirochnik on New Masters. The last thing I wanted to talk about is one more thing we don't teach, but something that's worth talking about a little anyway. That's style. Style is something that a lot of beginners talk about and think about, but they don't necessarily fully understand what it is, and more importantly, how it relates to the things we're learning here. I'll often have prospective students look at Drawabox and go, "Nah, I'm specifically interested in drawing anime," thinking that the concepts we explore here don't relate to them, and that comes down to a misunderstanding of what style actually is. Style is a series of choices that we make. There can be style in how you choose to walk, or style in how you speak, or write, or, in our case, draw. It's a formula we develop for representing things in a certain way, and while many people may joke that one might shield themselves behind their style in order to refute criticism, it isn't actually that easy for the simple reason that style has to be internally consistent. If you draw lips a certain way, you have to draw all lips that way, unless there's another specific rule that differentiates which lips are drawn in that manner. Those of you who are inclined towards mathematics, or even programming, may think of style as a function, with the input being reality, the output being your final image, and the function itself being all of the instructions that define the style itself. Another way to think about it is that style is the lens through which we look at the world. They bend and alter what we see, but they do so in a consistent manner. Any rays of light coming from the same angle will always reflect in the same direction. And so, with style, the same thing displayed in the same circumstances should always be drawn in the same way. So when it comes to developing a style, it's really a matter of creating a list of instructions for you to follow every time. You can start with something as simple as all my object silhouettes will have a thick outline. And gradually, as you explore working with that choice, you might find exceptions and the specific rules for those exceptions. It also helps to study the work of other artists. Master studies are a type of exercise we can perform to help explore aspects of how others work. It's the act of reproducing the work, but with specific focuses. For example, maybe you want to study how John Singer Sargent paints faces, or how Sui Milk uses abstract shapes to help the physical elements of her paintings pop, or how Craig Mullins manages to imply complex imagery through the use of just a couple of well-placed brushstrokes. Taking things even further, you can research what influenced the artists who influence you, to go back to their own roots and really understand the thinking behind their stylistic choices. At the end of the day, no artist is bound to just one style. You might have a variety of different styles to choose from, and if you're planning to work as an artist in a studio, you may be asked to produce your work while adhering to different stylistic rule sets. Hell, you may even find yourself using multiple styles within the same project. Bringing it back around before I digress too much, style is a barrel of monkeys all on its own, and it's something you will have the chance to explore to your heart's content. But underneath this litany of stylistic choices, there always exists the core foundation of the real three-dimensional world, and that is the one we seek to build here by focusing on spatial reasoning, confident and controlled markmaking, and careful, patient observation.